Good evening, everyone. Myself, Ms. Cheshta Jalan, and on behalf of Global Interstitial Society's Bladder Pain Society, GIBS, and Swati Spenters Private Limited, I would like to welcome all the delegates to the live webinar of GIBS on the theme An Update on UTI in association with Urogynecology Pelvic Floor Dysfunction and Incontinence Association on topic Candida auris, urinary tract infections and possible treatment. With this, I take the pleasure to introduce Dr. Tamil Selvi. She is the Senior Consultant Urogynecologist and Pelvic Surgeon at Madras Medical Mission Hospital, Chennai, and Mangai Women's Health Exclusive, Chennai. She is also the convener for today's webinar. Welcome, Dr. Tamil Selvi.
Thank you, Shrestha, and good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be a part of this. When Dr. Tanvir introduced the concept of a journal club meeting, and I was actually very thrilled because that is something we need to rely on to update ourselves as to what is happening around us in terms of IC and bladder pain syndrome. Journal club meeting was the next step forward, and I am happy that Dr. Tanvir proposed it and she has managed to execute it as well. So I'm sure that we should be able to do this at least once in 2 months to keep us all updated. With those words, I would like to invite Dr. Anuradha Koduri as she joined in. Mr. Shrestha? Yeah. Dr. Anuradha Koduri and Ms. Dr. Reena Desai, Reena Desai, President of UPAI, and Dr. Anuradha Koduri, Secretary of UPAI, both of them well known to me and very long time friends. And Dr. Reena Desai, Senior Consultant Gynecologist, is a pleasure to watch during conferences. She is actually so young at heart. She will be running up and down to ensure that everything is in place. And she listens to all the meetings, each and every word, and actually questions them very diligently. Nice to have you with us, madam. And Dr. Anuradha Koduri is again, I got introduced to Dr. Reena Desai through Dr. Anuradha Koduri. And she is, what to say, she is basically a person whom you should know through during your lifetime, because she has so much of energy. I don't know where she gets it from. So much of energy that she has translated into training, and she has come back to India to train the graduates over here in urogynecology and make them develop a passion in that. And with those words, over to both of you, Dr. Anuradha and Dr. Reena Desai.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you? Yeah, I can hear you. Can we hear you?
Yes, madam. We can hear you, madam. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Anuradha could not come today, I think, because her brother is not well. Welcome to you all. And this is the second GIBS meeting we are having with the UPIA Hyderabad. You to start your video. I do not have any video.
Ma'am, your video is off.
There is no video. Hello? I don't know. It
madam,
has gone.
She wanted you to switch on your camera, madam.
Yeah.
Will you be able to switch on your camera, madam?
I'm like the whole thing is gone off.
That's okay, madam. Then you can just say a few words. Shrestha, can you put up madam's slide so that we know? Yeah.
No, I don't have any spare talk to give basically. Okay. I've just joined in at the last moment basically. And Anuradha was supposed to give a talk, but she's not there. She's her brother is not well. So I don't know whether she'll be able to come or not. But I invite, thank you all from UPIA Hyderabad and also from KIMS Hospital. And the youngsters are there. I always prefer that the youngsters come forward to give a talk on this. And Dr. Tanvir is a fellow in our Urogynec fellowship program. And Dr. Bindu Priya would be the person who is the acting HOD at KIMS. And thank you all. Thank you. You can continue now.
Thank you, madam. Shrestha, do you want to start the proceedings now?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to invite Dr. Bindu Priya. She is the speaker for today. She is the consultant of urogynecology and gynecology. from KIMS Hospital, Hyderabad. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. So now let us go straight into the topic. So can I share my screen, Chester?
Yes, ma'am, you can.
So yeah, is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So this is Dr. Bindu Priya from KIMS Hospital, Hyderabad. So today we would be discussing on this rare topic, that is Candida auris urinary tract infection. So, and the base for today's discussion is basically this article, this review article, which was published in this journal called Antibiotics. And this was like recently published in the year 2020, December. So by Nicole Griffith and Larry Danziger. So the base for today's discussion is on this review article that we're going to discuss. So, and the scheme of today's presentation would go in this way. So coming to this topic, that is Candida auris urinary tract infection. So why are we discussing on this? So, and as we all know that urinary tract infection is one of the commonest infection that anyone would encounter, either in a community setting or in a hospital based practice. And we knew that traditionally this urinary tract infections, they were caused by gram-negative bacteria, but of late, even fungal urinary tract infections are on rise, especially even in fungal also. It could be either Candida albicans infections or it could be non-Candida albicans infection. And of this non-Candida albicans, that is our today's pathogen, that is Candida auris, has recently been identified as the etiologic agent in urinary tract infections all throughout the world. And why is this happening? And because this is Candida auris is supposed to be a globally emerging organism, and this has got very high mortality rates of about 60%. And still we are at a stage wherein the treatment recommendations for this infection are not very clear. There are no clear-cut guidelines as to how to deal with these infections. So coming to the epidemiology of this Candida auris, so this was first identified in Japan in the year 2009, but then retrospectively, once the identification process has been standardized, retrospectively they could even trace back this infection as early as 1996. In the United States of America, the infection was first seen in the year 2015. In India, there were published case reports of Candida auris urinary tract infections from the year 2010 to 2014. And of now, this Candida auris strains, they are found all across the world, with cases being reported from almost like 41 countries. And then, and maybe this number might still be less considering, you know, the global nature and global spread of this pathogen, because the reason being it is grossly misidentified and underreported. So, and what are the concerns that, as far as this Candida auris infection is concerned, is there are a few concerns. That is, it is like frequently undetected or misidentified by the traditional yeast detection methods, like whatever we routinely use. This Candida auris could be not detected at all. So it could be either reported as some non-Candida albicans species. So because of this, there are undiagnosed infections and there is a delay in the diagnosis, leading to environmental spread of infection. And the other characteristic of concern is this pathogen is like persistent in nature, either in the environment setting or in the infection setting. So it can lead to a persistent infection. So that is because, again, because of its characteristic called biofilm formation, wherein adherence of this pathogen to either surfaces or in vivo bodily fluids and bodily cavities can increase. And the other reason is like persistent, and because of this, there can be persistent colonization, and patients can get infected with this pathogen for a prolonged period of time. So there are reports wherein a person was infected almost up to 50 days with this organism. And the other disturbing feature of this infection is the resistance trends that the organism is currently exhibiting. So almost 40% of these isolates, they are resistant to 2 or more drug classes, and like 10% are predicted to be resistant to all available antifungal drugs, pan resistant. and almost the fluconazole, which we commonly use in Candida infections, 90% of these Candida auris are resistant to this fluconazole. And even amphotericin B, which is like we use in rare settings, even that resistance is almost is also around 30%. And echinocandin and flucytosine, which are like drugs of last resort, maybe that resistance is less commonly observed. When coming to risk factors, so risk factors for fungal infection is like in any other disease. So especially, hospitalized patients with critical illness admitted in ICU settings with all those invasive lines, central venous catheters, they're especially those kind of patients, they are at risk for these infections. And also patients with comorbids like diabetes, history of any prolonged surgeries, and then history of broad spectrum antibiotic usage. So definitely we have to think about this infection. And also the other dilemma is colonization versus infection. So recently now there is a lot of talk going on urinary microbiome, urinary mycobiome. So how do we differentiate whether the infection that we have isolated, whether the organism that we have isolated, is it just colonization or is it a real infection? This is where the critical, clinical decision making skills, they come into picture. And how do we diagnose, or how do we identify this organism? So as already discussed, this is like with the traditional methods, this commonly becomes undetected or it is like misidentified as some other Candida species. So only with the usage of this latest technologies like molecular based systems like real-time PCR or this laser desorption techniques, that this Candida auris can be isolated. And I'm sure these kind of testing facilities, we can't find them in a routine practice. And the other problem with this infection or with this culture, this thing is susceptibility breakpoints. So they are not specifically defined. The CDC criteria, whatever that MIC data that we get is only based from other Candida species infections. So that is where then the antifungal that we can choose for this infection also becomes little difficult. That decision making also becomes little difficult. And what are the published reports of Candida auris urinary tract infections? So almost in the literature till now, around 11 cases have been published so far. So and as you can, and those infections are summarized in this table. So as you can see, both males and females, especially who are admitted into these ICU settings with prolonged hospitalizations. So those kind of patients, they have been at risk. And the site of infection could be urine plus along with some other source like blood or even those catheter lines, central venous catheter lines. And so that is where they could isolate this organism. And again, the treatment choice was like a difficult decision wherein they have used all the higher antifungals as well. And coming to prognosis, as you can see on this 11 patients, almost like 4 to 5 patients have succumbed to this infection. And in the patients who have been who have survived, so the treatment duration was quite prolonged. So these are all the challenges with this infection. So coming to Candida auris in India, so in India, infections have been this article published in the year 2013. So this is a study conducted by Anuradha Chowdhury et al. So they have isolated this Candida auris in 12 patients in 2 hospitals in a Delhi-based setting. So and they have reported this as a new strain of Candida auris as an emerging etiologic agent of fungemia in Delhi. And this same group, they also found out this Candida auris, and which they propose to become the next superbug and which can lead to next pandemic in Andaman Islands. That soil, they have isolated this organism. And of course, the clinical relevance of this finding is yet to be ascertained. But still, considering the inherent characteristics and the virulence of this organism, maybe that is where we stand as of now. So to conclude, Candida auris is said to be a globally emerging pathogen, which is characterized by common misidentification, difficult eradication, and multi-drug resistance. And to aid to that, paucity of data is there, wherein clinical management is very uncertain. So with this background, now let us move on to the topic of how do we deal with this infection? How do we clinically manage? That is being dealt by Dr. Tanvir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bindu Priya, for setting the scene for Candida auris. Let's move over to Dr.
Ma'am, you're mute.
Ma'am, you're
Tamal ma'am,
mute.
you're mute.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Dr. Bindu Priya,
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
setting the
Yeah.
scene. For setting the scene for this. Now, let's move over to Dr. Tanvir to tell us more about how we are going to manage this scenario and what are the challenges we are supposed to be facing with Candida auris. Over to you, Dr. Tanvir.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So for all our delegates, so me and Bindu are going to give an overview of what Candida auris is and another study on fungi microbiome, which is just a few key points of that particular study. And our experts will give you more insight on this, on these two studies. So to start with, Candida auris, the optimal treatment, optimal management. So this is the paper. Bindu has already told all of you that we're going to discuss this paper. So is there an optimal treatment? Maybe, maybe not. We're not really sure at this stage. So challenges that we face is a high chance of misidentification. There is fluconazole resistant. She said 90%, but it's in some studies, it's now coming up to 100%, and a significant mortality going up to about 60%. Urinary tract isolates. It's not very well documented in the urine, but we believe, or a lot of studies do believe now, that it is found more often in urine. And if you test it, you find it more. And that's why sometimes you have a lot of recurrent UTIs. So urinary isolates is found in 92% of patients, and there is concomitant blood infection reported in about 60% of these patients. Therefore, you need an aggressive treatment for symptomatic patients. What do you do? So there are some control measures that we need to follow. One is the source control measures. How do you do it? So infection control, extremely important. So why I want to talk about this is in this time is because of the COVID that is coming up. There is supposed to be chances of a rise in Candida auris because of the atmosphere that we are in. So what precautions do we take? Infection control, extremely important. Wear personal protective equipment in the hospitals, hand washing, very, very important, use of alcohol-based sanitizer, and if possible, difficult in our setting, but a single patient room. So every time a hospital personnel goes into a patient's room where a patient is there in the hospital for a very long time, in the ICUs or a long-term admitted patients, immunocompromised patients, I think it's very important to follow these rules. And very important to use high-grade disinfectants, which we have already started using in this time of COVID. So more details can be found on the website below. Infection surveillance, screen the contact person, screen the patient environment weekly until the patient is discharged. So once we identify this particular disease by the methods Bindu has already told us, then we screen the patient and screen the patient environment weekly till it is negative. Even after discharge of the patient, we need to screen the environment until it is negative. Correct? So, what are the strategies to control it? Correct identification and source control, which I've already spoken about. Correct identification by other methods, which Bindu has told. Now, it's not very easily available in India. And though the MALDI-TOF MS method is supposed to be 100% accurate, which is not available. There's only one company dealing with which I'll talk about later. So source control is the first step. Remove all invasive lines, such as urinary catheters or IV lines. If you find the infection to be positive, remove the nidus of infection. Eradication screening is also important. This is following treatment. Once you treat these patients, you need to repeatedly screen these colonized or the infected patients to check the efficacy of the therapy and to prevent spread of the Candida auris infections. Very important is to do weekly cultures of urine and blood while the patient is on treatment. Continue antifungal therapy for 14 days after the first negative culture. To stop therapy thereafter, you need at least 2 negative cultures, which have to be 1 week apart. And we need to follow up these patients once we send them home, call them back at 1 month, and even following that every month for cultures. Now, unfortunately, we don't know till when we need to call them back. That's not been mentioned in the study. And we also don't know what is the rate of false negative screening by the tests that we have to do. Now, the treatment, talking about the active treatment and the treatment pathways. So before I go to this, I would just like to talk about the drugs. What drugs are used? Bindu's already spoken about these drugs. So echinocandins is the first line. It is well tolerated. It is 70% effective. The only problem is it is to be given by IV. Amphotericin B, it is toxic, not very effective for urinary candidates, but it is included due to high resistant rates to other tolerable drugs. Flucytosine, there is a lack of availability of this particular drug in 78.3% of countries. So I'm not very sure if it's available. I could not find it for whatever search I did or asking at the pharmacies. So I'm not sure if it's available in India. It is hepatotoxic and causes hematological toxicity. The only positive point for this particular drug is it is excreted in urine in an active form. So hence it does help in urinary infection. Now, and combination therapies are most of the times, 50% of the times, combination therapies are preferred. The following drugs are combined, and very rarely bladder irrigations are given in persistent, recurrent, and resistant cases. Some potential newer drugs have come in, so we hope they are better than these particular drugs and more safer. So coming to the treatment pathways. So what's important when we look at treatment pathways? It's important to treat a patient. This is a proposed pathway following this review. There are no real studies done out of it, but whatever case reports are available and a few maybe prospective studies, they have just got all together and come with a treatment pathway. It depends on the patient's clinical status, the presence and absence of clinical infection, comorbidities, infections, active infection, and any therapy history. So a treatment pathway A is when not to treat, when the patient is asymptomatic and when there is absence of critical illness, any invasive lines, diabetes, recent surgery, and recent systematic antimicrobial use. So you don't give any antifungal therapy in this particular patients, in these group of patients. Now, this treatment therapy it differs from the CDC because CDC believes even in the high-risk patients, you don't treat these with antifungal drugs. But the authors of this particular review believe that if patients have high risk, as mentioned here, any of these risk factors, they have to be any of these comorbidities, then you need to treat them with antifungal therapy, either monotherapy or multi-drug therapy. When to treat in patients who are asymptomatic with some of the high-risk factors or comorbidities, who are symptomatic or who have never had a treatment. So generally a monotherapy may suffice, and it's consistent with the CDC guidelines. Now, the difficult pathway is the pathway B, where the decision making is a little difficult in this confusing disease symptoms sometimes, which is presented women who or patients who come with symptomatic infection or who have had a prior treatment who are resistant. How do you choose therapy? Based on 3 different factors. And now this depends a lot on the cultures and on testing, which very rarely available in India, just by one company that I've heard of. So you have to reach out to them and maybe get tested. So you don't get the infection, you don't get Candida auris in simple conventional lab testing. You need specific testing. So this particular company is trying to make it more available. So let's hope that it is widely available soon. If it is now echocardin susceptibility, then you give them this drug. Or if it is not, then you give, if they do not respond in about 5 to 7 days, then you give them a combination of drugs, or you add in flucytosine along with amphotericin B. Now, if there is resistance to echinocardin therapy, then you add in amphotericin monotherapy. Again, you wait for 5 to 7 days, check them clinically, and also if there is persistent infection, then you add in other co-drugs. Also, sometimes you may need to add in bladder irrigations. If there is known resistance to echinocardin therapy, previous or recurrent or current therapy, plus if you have already given them amphotericin B, then you add in multi-drugs again. So in this disease, multi-drug therapy plays a role. These are the different doses of therapy and also the follow-up. So what is an Indian scenario? So this is a company, it's called the Biomeric Corporate Company. So it's available in India, in Delhi and Nacharam. So if anybody is working and wants to know about this, can maybe go ahead and find out. So they're also doing a couple of studies and a couple of tests that have been made available, and they're trying to get the time down to as low as 3 hours to come out with rapid testing. So yes, it's called a superbug, and COVID-19 pandemic has offered a perfect condition for the widespread outbreaks of Candida auris. And also it's believed that this particular super drug is due to global warming. Bindu's already mentioned about this particular study, which has come out in March and April 2021, where they found it is very resistant to high temperatures. So that's not really a good thing to know. So when should you suspect this particular disease? If the patient is from the ICU or high dependency area, if the patient is transferred from another hospital after a long stay, multiple intervention or prior antifungal exposure in any patient, and if one identifies any of the other in a commercial system and any of these Candida species, you also have to suspect Candida auris. And if Candida is resistant to fluconazole or any other drugs. So the ICMR has actually given out a notification, and they have asked to contact these two doctors if you find any of the above situations. Okay, so that was the first study that we spoke about. Tamil ma'am, you want to make some comments before I go to the second one?
We'll let you continue, Dr. Tanvir, and then we'll move over to we'll have a discussion at the end of both.
Yeah, okay. So the next paper that we're going to discuss is changes in urinary microbiome and its association with symptom flares in ICBPS. This is also a vast paper, and though it's one paper which is a single paper, so I thought we'll just mention it here. It's on microbiome, but maybe we'll have another journal club to talk more on this paper. So what was the purpose of this study? The purpose of this study was to correlate whether the presence of fungi is associated with symptom flare, pain, and urinary severity in a prospective longitudinal study of women with ICBPS who were enrolled in the MAP research network. So basically, does changes in urinary microbiome causes symptom flare or changes in symptom pattern, that is pain and urinary severity? So what was the methodology? There were 202 diagnosed BPS female participants, and they took the questionnaires of pain scales, of genitourinary pain scales and bladder pain symptom scores at baseline, at 6 months and at 12 months, with at least women who had one flare and aged MAT participants with no reported flares. So the results were, they had 504 samples, 202 females. They found 13 fungal species and 43 genera. So fungi was detected in 108 women, and fungi was not detected in 399 samples, urinary samples. So when they looked at the species, what was significant and what was not significant. So when Candida species was not associated with flares, nor was it associated with pain severity, but it was greatly associated with those women who had high urinary symptoms or high severity of urinary symptoms. And also they've done a genus level analysis, which revealed an increased evidence of Candida in urine, in high urinary states, which are statistically significant. So what does this study give us? The study did indicate a significant difference in the prevalence of fungi in the midstream urine specimen between flare and non-flare groups. So the urinary specimen did reveal a significant difference, but there were no difference in the flare reporting by the women or the pain reported by the women. A significantly greater prevalence of fungi was detected in the flare group compared to non-flare group in the midstream urine specimen. So the absence of difference in ICBPS participants with self-reported flares compared to those with no flares, as well as the participants with high versus low pain severity, would seem to negate the importance of fungi in ICBPS. So increased fungal presence, diversity, and or abundance was associated with high urinary symptom severity only. So, and also we do, there was another study done by the bacterial microbiome in these ICBPS women, and no significance was found in any of either in the flare group or in the pain group or also in the urinary symptom group. But fungi did seem to have a significant association with the symptom group. So the learning points from this study is pain and urinary symptoms in ICBPS should have been considered separately in this particular study. And the number of participants are too low to come to any conclusion. But yes, there is a scope of more studies to be done with a fungi microbiome in urinary repeated UTI or even with ICBPS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tanvir. That was an excellent review of what to expect out of this expert committee meeting. Dr. Tanvir is a GIPS core member with MS OBGYN, who is very enthusiastic academically, and she's a consultant at Tanvir Hospital. I was muted when I was trying to introduce you, so I'm just reintroducing you again. Tanvir, to those
Thank you, ma'am.
people who might not know you. So that's the thing. I think you've set the scenario very well for all the expert comments. And shall we introduce each one, Sheshta? And
Yes.
then we can ask them to comment on the relevance of Candida auris in the Indian subcontinent, as well as how we are going to address the issue of basically identifying the organism, and if we need to go down the line of identifying the organism, and if we do, what are the treatment options which we would be considering based on the availability, and what is the clinical relevance of the study? Because though it is a very good study, I did find there were a few things which we needed to address in that study. Can we start introducing each one, Sheshta? Will you take over from here?
Sure, ma'am. We have Dr. Rajesh Taneja. He is chairman of GIBS. He is senior consultant and advisory urology and robotic surgery at Indraprasth Apollo Hospital, New Delhi, India. We have Dr. Apul Goyal. He is executive core committee member of GIBS. He's professor at in Department of Urology at King George Medical University, Lucknow, India. We have Dr. Shivam Priyadarshi. He is senior professor and unit head at Department of Urology at SMS Medical College and Hospital, Jaipur, India. He is executive core committee member of GIBS. We have Dr. Amita Jain. She is senior consultant urogynecology at Medanta Urology and Robotic Surgery Institute, Gurugram, India. She is the founder member of FEPA and executive core committee member of GIBS. We have Dr. Tamil Selvi. She is senior consultant urogynecologist and pelvic surgeon at Madras Medical Mission Hospital, Chennai, and at Mangai Women's Health Exclusive, Chennai. I welcome you all as an expert, and the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Shall we, Dr. Tanvir, how do you want to do this? Are you going to ask each one of us, or shall we all start answering one by one?
Ma'am, you've already put in a question, so I think we'd start with that, and then, yeah.
So can I start with my comments on the topic? So when Tanvir asked me to, she shared the agenda and said, we want to have a journal club like this. So I was wondering why we should have a journal club on Candida auris. So I will start with my comments on that. So if you look at Candida auris, the point is that on one end of the spectrum, all that we have talked about in the papers is a setting where there is an immunocompromised patient, whether it is a post-transplant or a diabetic or an ICU setting, somebody who is already immunocompromised. So that is where the Candida auris surfaces. And the second end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is what we are looking at, an IC patient who is healthy, moving around, eating well, healthy otherwise, just only having urinary symptoms. And perhaps this edge of the spectrum, we have hyperimmunity rather than immunocompromised. So most of the theories are that there are mast cells and there are histamines and everything. So all those things mean that the immunity is very high. So what is what are we looking at? So the concept that came to my mind was that perhaps Candida auris is an innocuous organism which is lying in the urinary tract. It initiates hyperimmune response because it is exposed to a lot of antifungals once or antimicrobials during the lifetime. When it chooses to become virulent in immunocompromised setting, it finds itself, it exposes itself as a multi-drug resistant organism because it has survived the short courses of fluconazole or other drugs that the patient may have received for any other reason. So that is where we are. But then other thing that was important for this was that what is the significance? Now, if you look at the MAP study, which has been quoted extensively, they have talked about, they have focused on the flares. So they have not talked about etiology, why the patient developed bladder pain syndrome or interstitial cystitis to begin with. But flares they have tried to. So most of the work that MAP study has done is done on the flares. So they thought that let us pick it up. Now, if I were to look at Candida auris this way, having said this, it means that it is a commensal in the urinary tract. But then they have been able to find that, okay, if they can isolate it, that means perhaps that is the cause of flares. That's okay. Then the next step is why we have not been able to, or whoever has worked with interstitial cystitis has not been able to identify this as one of the contributory factors to the ICBPS etiopathogenesis. Then, if you look at what our philosophy is, that if you get a urine routine done, and if there are no pus cells, and if there are no leukocyte esterase, which is a product of bacteria, again, nitrite is a product of bacteria, which means that if there are no pus cells, we think that there is no infection. But here is an organism called Candida auris. I do not know if the MAP study, which has talked so much about it in IC flares, have they done a urine routine examination to show that there are pus cells or not? So the protocol of MAP is a dipstick study. Dipstick may miss pus cells. I don't know what is the sensitivity of pus cells in dipsticks, but a good centrifuged urine examination should be in order, which has been missed in the MAP study, the current MAP study. So I will have to say that, okay, we know that there is a commensal in the bladder, which could be a target for research to identify whether it is contributing as an etiological agent or not. We really should go ahead and have more studies. We all have our patient bases. We can have our own protocols. We can start with urine examination, add to the pus cells in the urine, and add to the real-time PCR or reverse transcriptase PCR for fungus, whatever way they want to do it, provided it is available to each one of us. And then we can think about it. But coming to the treatment, as we have already seen, it is a multi-drug resistant organism. The treatment is not only costly, has a lot of adverse effects. So should we be treating? That is something which we need to understand. We will have to find ways to reduce the toxicity of whatever antifungal we use, and should we ever be using that or not. So that is the second step. The first step is to prove or at least establish a causal relationship between the presence of this organism and the interstitial cystitis bladder pain syndrome symptoms, and why we have missed all these years. And the second step will be intervention. I think this is all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Can we move over to Dr. Apul Goyal, and then finally we will summarize all our comments together. Over to you, sir, Dr. Apurva.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just wondering while Dr. Taneja was speaking. So, Tanveer, did you mean in the IC paper that the second paper that you were presenting, did you mean in fungal, the fungal elements that were looked at the time of flares, did it mean Candida auris or did it mean any fungus?
Not Candida auris, sir, because
Yes.
they cannot diagnose Candida auris with the PCR that they have done. So maybe if it's specific, if the other Candidas are diagnosed according to this review article, if they're resistant to the other Candida species which are not non-albicans, then possibly it is Candida auris. That's how they have given in the review article. So I was also thinking in that way that if you actually test for it, so possibly you may find it more.
No, so we need to have clarity. There were two papers that you presented. The first
Yes, sir.
one was on Candida auris, and
Auris.
the second one didn't mention the subtype of of the fungal infection.
They did, sir. So I can just put that up for you. What are the different, because I was under the impression that already the paper has been sent. So that's why I didn't put up.
Okay, doesn't matter.
you know.
Leave it.
Yes.
Let's forget that.
Yeah,
So,
the other species,
yeah.
not the Candida auris, but some of them falling in the same group of Candida auris, but different species.
Yeah. So, see, my take is that fungal infections per se, diagnosing it, just documenting fungal infections in a urinary sample, the interpretation is extremely difficult. The literature itself is confused. And as clinicians, it is a very difficult call to find out whether it's just there, as a colony there without causing infection, or whether it's really causing infection and giving rise to symptoms and they require treatment. As you mentioned, the CDC also doesn't recommend, even for Candida auris, which is so bad, they don't recommend because they consider urinary bladder as a non-invasive surface. Okay, so if it is in the kidney, then it's a different matter. You of course need to treat it. But if it's limited to the urinary bladder, because the interpretation is so difficult. Okay, so auris, Candida auris, the name came from because it was first detected in the external ear. So that is the reason of the name auris. It relates to the ear. And see, because it's so rare and we have hardly a handful of studies. So the recommendation, it's very difficult. I haven't treated, I haven't seen. And in urology practice, typically it's a ICU setting where these infections come up. So I haven't, for a personal experience, I have no experience. Whatever I have read is what Dr. Taneja and you have already mentioned. So no point in repeating it again. So the second paper was really interesting. And Dr. Taneja already pointed out the pitfalls because we don't have the urinary pus cells documentation. And again, just documenting, just finding out fungi in a urinary sample and correlating it with aggravation of symptoms is sort of, because again, if you just take the thing that documenting fungus in a urinary specimen doesn't mean infection actually. So how do you interpret in IC scenario as well is sort of confusing. We need to have more data, maybe more studies that may tell us what is the real role of fungi in patients with the ICBPS. Again, ICBPS patients primarily they are women, but it's seen in men also, and men of course have very little incidence of fungal infection in the urinary tract, although patients can have fungal prostatitis and infections, but it's not so common. So this is what I had to say. So anything that I can again say something, but Dr. Shivam, you want to add something?
Thank you, sir.
Should I come in? Dr. Tamiselli?
Yes, sir. Floor is yours, sir, for the comments.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to come here. The subject is not we are not very conversant with this Candida auris, as everybody has said. And I think there is a similarity between our COVID infection and new epidemics or new infections like Candida auris infections. So this is all because probably we are not looking things in the right perspective. One of the most important thing is probably the use of antibiotics, which has given rise to a lot of drug resistance and different other organisms which are coming up. So antibiotic policy is, I think, is something which has to be taken up very seriously in the world today. And in our country, definitely it has to be taken up. Otherwise, we will end up in so many infections that would be almost very fatal. And I think this Candida auris is one of them. So we need to reduce do an optimal use of antibiotics in our hospitals, in our day-to-day practice. And these type of infections definitely can be reduced if we reduce the hospitalization stay, if we reduce the catheterization, the days of catheterization, the other lines, that central lines, etc. If they are not prolonged, definitely, or even the ICU stay. I think ICU is the most dangerous place in the world, probably, as far as the infection is concerned. So staying in ICU is not a very good thing, and unless it is definitely a very urgent situation and it has to be done. And secondly, about the second paper about the urinary microbiome, that's a very interesting topic because it's a very fascinating topic, microbiota and microbiome. And it has been seen that different urinary problems have different sets of urinary microbiome. It's not only urinary tract infection. There studies have been done in urinary CA bladder, in prostate carcinoma, in urinary tract infection recurrent, in prostatitis, etc. Where they have shown that there is a different set of urinary microbiome in a particular disease. So, and that is also true with ICBPS. There have been studies which have shown, not with just a fungal microbiome, but with, because the microbiome consists of bacteria, virus, fungi, everything, protozoa. So they have said that there is a change in the urinary microbiome in ICBPS also. So this could be one of the etiopathogenesis also. As we have known already that the stool microbiome also changes in ICBPS. So people have done studies on that also. We have learned about the bladder bowel crosstalk also. So there are so many things that are coming up, and it's a very interesting subject. So I think the most important thing is what I'm going a little bit more philosophical in this sense, that our thinking of anti has to be changed. Anything antibiotics, killing bacteria every time, and even the feelings of anti should be replaced by sim, that is symbiotics, symbiosis, living together as such. So we know, because we are not individual human beings, we have a microbiome which has more than about 10 times more cells in our own body. And so our human genome is even less than what is our microbiome genome. So we need to live together in a symbiotic fashion rather in an anti-fashion. So I think that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very well. Philosophically as well.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on both the papers, please?
Hello.
Yeah, Amita, we can hear you. Over to you.
So yeah, actually I was hearing talks of all learned people and everything actually was covered, but the thing is that even I was thinking the relevance of the papers, both of the papers. I understand they were one paper is addressing that what is the global risk of Candida auris. But the second paper which Tanvi presented, that there could be flare, and that flare could be the responsible factor for the flare could be fungal infection. So if you read that paper, I just read in morning, and I just read that paper in morning, and I saw that even they are confused, because they think that even in this flare, the Candida species was found more in those patients where urinary symptoms were prominent rather than pain symptoms. So there are two different kinds of subgroups. So it still gives us a clue that there could be something which we are actually lacking. Whether we are saying that this is actually ICBPS patient where we are having flare, or it is something else. It's actually, even in ICBPS patient, infection with some species can occur in later part. It's not like a patient is diagnosed of ICBPS, then all kinds of urinary symptoms could be just because of the flare of ICBPS. One thing is that. And second thing is that even if you're thinking that, yes, you are, because you have not found the conventional urine cultures and everything is negative, and that's why you think that fungal infections are responsible for all the symptoms all the time, then we have to actually differentiate. So whether those, we are talking about so many phenotypes, and we are talking about Hannah's and non-Hannah's ulcer, two types of interstitial cystitis, whether the non-Hannah's ulcer is actually kind of something else we are looking for, some kind of change in urinary microbiome. So these things are so confusing. We cannot make a conclusion on the basis of these kinds of studies, just because they are, like Dr. Taneja said, that how they diagnose that it's not a urinary tract infection, just Dipistic test. I don't think so. That's a complete kind of evaluation. And so I think if we want to make a gist, we should make our own protocol to differentiate between these kinds of different presentations, and to differentiate and to understand the role of especially fungal infection in all kinds. Like if you're talking just about the patients of ICBPS, then whether the flare is actually the flare of interstitial cystitis or something else, that we have to differentiate. I think so. That's in a nutshell my.
Thank you, Dr. Amita. Now, just a few words which I wanted to contribute to this discussion. The first part of it is I totally agree with everyone else who said prevention is the best thing. So we should be thinking about how to prevent a fungal infection, especially avoiding it getting it into the urinary tract. As a urogynecologist, we do have this problem of patients presenting with recurrent dysuria, frequency, pelvic pain, where we do find recurrent candidiasis as a vaginal infection. And sometimes even after curing the vaginal infection, when they keep coming back with urinary symptoms, we do ask specifically for a fungal culture. And sometimes even when the fungal culture is usually done for Candida glabrata. So if you're going to ask for a fungal culture, the take-home message in presenting with recurrent fungal infections in women will be to ask for Candida albicans and Candida glabrata, because those two actually can be present even if albicans is not present, glabrata is present. So far, we haven't asked for Candida auris, because I don't think even we can even ask for it, because there is a specific test needed for it. Now, having a dialysis unit and a renal transplant unit within the premises, we have seen patients with urinary tract infection with fungus, and it is a very difficult condition to treat, as Dr. Apul Goyal was mentioning. It is a very difficult condition, especially in a renal transplant patient with the amphotericin and fluconazole, both of that having their own toxicity. So the emphasis would be on the prevention of a fungal infection. And secondly, and more importantly, in relevance to ICBPS, yes, the study did look at flares and did look at association of flares with the fungal organism. But then it didn't look for anything else. If I were to repeat that study, then I would probably repeat in such a way during the flares, I would look for both the bacterial as well as a fungal component, and then decide whether that fungal component is the contributing factor for the flares, either it is a pain or a urinary symptom, rather than just looking for the fungal component alone. So from that is the point I would like to make. So would you, is there anything else if anyone like to add on? I think we've got a couple of more minutes and then we will move on to the vote of thanks. Over to the expert team. Yes, Amita, you can unmute yourself and say. And
Yeah, just you were talking about, we have not studied whether these players, what was the like what kind of treatment were given to these players, whether antifungal or they just responded to the all kinds of treatment which we usually give for ICBPS. So that is also a point. Just to find out fungus and then we are doing blah blah many things is not enough. So we must know what is the impact, whether we require any specific treatment, just to know that yes, fungus was there. And so I think that protocol should be that if these players are not responding to the usual treatment of ICBPS, then we should look for these kinds of rare cases. That should be the protocol. Otherwise, I don't think so. Just finding fungus just because of the flare is enough, I think.
thank you, Amita. Dr. Shivam, sir.
Yeah. So whenever you find candida in urine, it's important to exactly find out whether it is just a contamination, it's a colonization, it's an infection, or it is a candidemia. So these four things are totally two extremes, right, of the same spectrum. So if it is a just simple contamination, nothing has to be done. Even if there is a colonization, probably not much has to be done. If there's an infection, you need to treat, but not that aggressively. But if it is candidemia, definitely it needs a very aggressive kind of treatment. So it is very important that we try to divide these into these four. And if you repeat a urine culture, then you will definitely can rule out if it is a contamination. So because otherwise it will come again. And secondly, if you do a urine culture or a fungal culture, which is an ordinary culture, you would not be able to find out these organisms. Even the bacteria that you are talking about of the urinary microbiome are usually not, cannot be cultured with the ordinary bacterial culture. That's why the dogma today is that urine is sterile is a false statement, because urine has its own microbiome and there are a lot of bacteria present, and that can be detected by the next generation sequencing that we know, 16S RNA sequencing that everybody is doing now. So if we can actually find out what type of microbiome setting is there in a particular disease, then definitely we can say that yes, this particular pathological microbiome is probably resulting into this type of problem. So that type of investigation and that type of facility should be there to if you want to do a further study in such cases. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Point well made, sir. Thank you. Dr. Tanvir, would you like to wind up and ask Dr. Taneja to deliver the vote of thanks, please?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, thank you so much to all the experts and Vidhu and Meena ma'am for being here. Deepti, Chesta, I think they're a big support. They've always been very supportive, very active. So that's really helped. So these papers I have selected, so because I thought we need to talk about something that we don't see commonly, but in the times of COVID, I felt that it might be on a rise, though we don't diagnose it. We can't really do much about it. Agreed. But it's always good to know something new. It's always good to read more on things that may not be very common. So it just opens up our minds. So that's it from my side. Sir, you can take over. Taneja, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Tanvir, for getting this topic here. Just a last passing thought that I was going through in my mind, that since we cannot use antifungals in a patient who's otherwise healthy, we don't want to use a toxic antifungal. It would be good idea to implant healthy bacteria or healthy biome. So that should be our philosophy. So I think we will have to work on that, something that can displace Candida auris from the system and something that can multiply and be friendly to the IC bladder. So we will have to work on that rather than working on an antifungal. So thank you very much, Tanveer, and thank you very much, Dr. Tamil Selvi, and thank you the GIBS team, Cheshta and Deepthi, who have set up this meeting technically, and of course, professors here, all of them, senior professors, Professor Shivam, Professor Apul, and Madam Neena, and we missed Dr. Kaduri, but I'm sure next time we will have them. And Tamil Sebli did a wonderful job conducting the whole meeting. And Amita, of course, with your expert comments, you are the right person to start this kind of a thing from Delhi. So we look forward to your pilot study on Candida auris in the coming times. And Gibbs, yes. Yes, Dr.
Just
Shiva.
adding a small comment to Dr. Rajesh Taneja's comment on, we have studies of intravesical installation of lactobacilli in ICBPS. So there are studies which have studied lactobacilli installation to reduce the symptoms of ICBPS. So people are doing these kind of
So
studies.
wonderful. So this is how we learned. So you will have to project it in the next GIBS meeting. So one of the papers that your resident can present is this.
Definitely, it's a very fascinating subject, and I have already taken up microbiome as my topic in the next annual meeting. So definitely, I would like to present. Yes.
Good. Wonderful.
Thank
So
you.
thank you all. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And it has been a wonderful time. Have a nice evening. And those who work 5 days a week, have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, Sheshta.
Thank you. Thank you.